Welcome to Pixel Football, and today we're looking back at Championship Manager 93, a game that not only ruined more marriages than Ryan Giggs, but one that sits on the Mount Rushmore of football management games. This was just the second instalment in the series, but one that really raised the bar. So I'm going to reveal my top 10 cult heroes of the game and why they were so good. But this was so tough to narrow down. There's so many great players who could be in this top 10. So let me know in the comments who your cult heroes were. I'd really love to hear them. But I'm not just looking at their in-game greatness. I'm going to dive into what actually happened in their career. Did they live up to their Championship Manager hype? Or was it all just a simulation? Let's get into the top 10. So I think a really great aspect of this game were the hidden gems in the lower leagues, and there were a fair few. But for me, one of the best was Ceri Hughes at Luton. The young Welshman was always a great pick to pluck out of Division 2 and would always do a really great job. But to be honest, I don't really know much about Ceri Hughes. I got a vague recollection of him playing in the Premier League, but I don't really know what happened to him apart from that. Let's take a quick look. So, Welsh former footballer who played as a midfielder. His clubs included Luton Town, for which he played for 8 years between 1989 and 1997. It looks like he went to Wimbledon, and that's where he would have played in the Premier League with Wimbledon, but only played 31 league games over 3 years, so not a massive fixture in the side. But it looked like he had a solid career. He had 8 caps for Wales between 92 and 97. So had a decent career, but probably didn't scale the heights that he did quite often in Championship Manager 93. So at number 9 is Craig Hignett, who I always thought was consistently a really good player in the game. There are younger prospects in his position you can buy, but he's a really good attacking player and often available to buy because he's at Middlesbrough, depending on which club you're managing, of course. And unlike some of the players in this list you'll see, I know he had a really successful career. So yeah, he was at Borough for a long time, the majority of the decade in fact. So he would have been playing with all those 90s greats for Middlesbrough, Ravanelli, Juninho, Emerson, quality players. What a time to be at the club. But I just noticed, I didn't realise he was at Crewe for so long before Borough. And his goal scoring record for them was prolific. 42 goals in 121 league appearances. It's pretty amazing. I mean, in fact, he had a really good goal scoring record throughout his career. And he seems to have spent most of his career floating between the Premier League and the Championship. But I just noticed there, right at the end of his career, he played a couple of games for Billingham Synthonia, who I keep seeing on people's Wikipedia pages. I don't know anything about them. Football club based in North Yorkshire. Let's see who's played for them as well, because I know other people have. There's a name, which ties back nicely to Craig Hignett. Ben Pollock. I wonder if that is a relation of Jamie Pollock. Yes, Ben Pollock is Jamie Pollock's son, also a former professional footballer who is with Craig Hignett, I believe, in Championship Manager 93. So that ties back really nicely there. Next up at 8 is Everton wonder kid Billy Kenny, who I used to love on Championship Manager. I don't know if it's just me, but I used to really like players who could play in multiple positions. But the exception to that for me was Billy Kenny, who could just play in the centre of midfield. I think he was about 18 or 19 at the start of the game. And it's funny with Championship Manager being from a pre-internet age. It used to build up like an affinity with a player, even though you didn't really necessarily know anything about them, like how they played, or even what they looked like. You could just strike up an affinity with a player based on how you saw them through the game. And for me, Billy Kenny was a bit like that. I always saw him similar to Gascoigne or how maybe Phil Foden plays now, like really skillful, with like a low centre of gravity, but technically really astute. But I don't know anything about Kenny. I don't really remember him playing. So let's take a look to see where he ended up. Okay, Billy Kenny, English former professional footballer who played as midfielder for Everton and Oldham, making a total of 21 appearances in the Football League. And Kenny retired from professional football at the age of just 21. Wow, that's really young. Seems like his dad was also a former player for Everton. Kenny was a product of Everton's youth system and made his debut in 92. In total, Kenny made 17 league appearances for Everton and also made a single appearance for England under-21s. At the start of his career, Kenny showed great promise and was thought to have the potential to become a key player for both Everton and England, with former Everton player Peter Beardsley hailing Kenny as the Goodison Gaza. There we go. So my instincts were correct to think of him in that mould. His reputation was further enhanced when he was named man of the match in the Premier League's first ever Merseyside derby. To have that much potential, he must have got a lot of pressure on his shoulders at a really young age. And it seems like maybe it just didn't work out for him. Fledgling career was blighted by injury at first, and later looks like he had some kind of personal issues away from the game as well. Tried to rejuvenate his career at Oldham, but again, didn't seem to work out. And then obviously retired when he was 21. What a shame. Because Kenny never came close to fulfilling his potential, he ended his professional career at such a young age. He's often seen as a lost talent of English football. Rob Smythe of The Guardian placed Kenny at number 1 in a list of football's lost talents. It's a shame, but what a great player and Championship manager. It's just a shame he didn't quite have the career that he so nearly could have had. So at number 7 is Joey Beauchamp, one of Oxford United's greatest ever players. A bit like Ceri Hughes, he was a level above where he was playing, so he always really stood out in the game. I used to really like players who could play both centrally and on one of the wings, and Beauchamp fit that role really well, playing both in the middle and on the right wing. I know a bit about Beauchamp's career away from Championship manager. I know he had a really short spell at West Ham, but never actually played for them, so he nearly made that step up to the Premier League, which I think he definitely could have done, but it obviously just didn't work out. And then he went on to Swindon Town. I grew up near Swindon, so I remember him having a spell there as well, even though they were really big rivals of Oxford. But I imagine he just wanted to get out of West Ham at the time, and then returned back to his boyhood club Oxford and had another really successful time there. Looks like he made over 400 appearances for Oxford and stayed with them for the rest of his career before moving down to non-league. Unfortunately, Beauchamp had a really tough time off the pitch and had a well-documented battle with mental health, and that ultimately led to his untimely death. But I remember him being an electric player, both on Championship manager, but also in real life. And he goes down as one of Oxford United's best ever players. Okay, so we're now really stepping up into this list. And another gem from Division 1, maybe the best player in Division 1 on Championship manager, potentially. And that is Tommy Johnson. Johnson starts the game at Derby, one of the strongest teams below the Premier League, with players like Marco Gabbiadini, Paul Kitson, Mark Pembridge. But the shining light in the team is definitely Tommy Johnson, who is always a player I love to buy. He pretty much hits the ground running if you sign him as a Premier League club. And within a couple of seasons, he's one of the best players in the game. And although he never hit those heights in real life, he did have a solid career at the top level from what I can remember. So he started a career at Notts County, and a professional by the end of the decade when still only 18 years old. And his prolific goal scoring saw Notts County reach the First Division in 91 after 2 successive promotion playoff triumphs. However, Notts County lasted just 1 season in the top flight and missed out on a place in the new Premier League. So close. I guess that's his performances for Notts County must be why he was so highly rated at Derby in Championship manager. During the second half of the 91-92 season, Johnson left and moved to ambitious Derby, who then narrowly missed out on a place in the Premier League. He helped them reach the new Division 1 playoff final, but lost against Leicester. And Johnson finally made his Premier League debut with a move to Aston Villa. He played for Aston Villa a couple of seasons, scored 13 league goals in 47 games, and then moved to Celtic, where, again, he had a similar record for Celtic, but then kind of slowly slipped down, had a loan spell at Everton, but didn't play much for them, and then went to Wednesday. Probably his best spell after that was with Gillingham. So never as good as he was in Championship manager, but still had a really good record, good goal scoring record for most of the teams he played for. At number 5 is Don Hutchison at Liverpool, who turns into an absolute goal machine. He's one of those players you'd always want in your team and will always score goals, no matter if he's playing up front or in midfield. In real life, he had a solid career, but was nowhere near the level of superstar he was in Championship manager. So after leaving Liverpool, he went on to establish himself at clubs like West Ham and Sheffield United and Everton, and he seemed to be known for his work rate and leadership, and the ability to score the odd goal, including the winner for Scotland against England at Wembley in 1999. He had over 400 career appearances before transitioning into punditry after retirement. But for me, he'll always be known as one of the best players on Championship Manager 93. So at number 4 is a bit of a personal favourite of mine and not someone I normally see on these kind of cult lists, and that's George Ndah. Firstly, he's only 18 at the start of the game, so I always really enjoy seeing him develop as the seasons go by. And he could play in both defence and attack, which is a bit of a winner on Championship Manager. And it sounds a bit silly, but I always loved his name. And it's a bit similar to another Champman great in Peter Unlove at Coventry. It sounds daft, but it always made him stand out a bit for me. And I always really liked that Crystal Palace squad on Championship Manager 93. They had like really great players like Chris Armstrong and Robert Bowery and Simon Osborne. And if he came good in the game, George Ndah, he was a real gem. But to be honest, he's also a bit of a favourite of mine because I used to love watching him play for Swindon in the late 90s. But he also had a really good spell at Wolves. Okay, into the top three. I feel like we're really hitting the peak Championship Manager folklore now. So one of the advances of the 93 version of the game compared with the original on the list was a selection of foreign-based players that could be bought. Most famously, Paul Gascoigne was on there, of course, playing for Lazio at the time, but it was basically impossible to ever sign him, at least not in his prime. But there was a whole host of players on there, such as Christian Vieri, Antonio Conte, Pep Guardiola. But I think the ultimate foreign player on the game, and the ultimate wonder kid really, was Nii Lamptey from Ghana, who was listed as playing in Belgium, where he was playing for Anderlecht at the time. His stats were incredible, ratings of 20 for passing and pace, and I believe he could play in midfield and attack, both centrally and on the left and right, which was amazing. And in many ways, he's the ultimate pick for Championship Manager 93 fans, and a player you'd always look to sign. But he obviously never hit those heights in real life. I seem to remember him growing up in really tough circumstances and having a few struggles through his career. So let's see where he ultimately ended up. So it seems like Lamptey first attracted global attention in 91, where he led Ghana to win the 91 FIFA Under-17 World Championship. He won the FIFA Best Player of the tournament, the Golden Ball Award in a competition that also included Argentina's Juan Sebastian Veron and Italy's Alessandro Del Piero. Lamptey's star shone more brilliantly than them all as he dominated everyone in the competition, and he was subsequently touted as the next Pelé by Pelé himself. He scored 4 goals in that tournament, and Lamptey later stated that although appreciated, Pelé's praise made life far harder for him, since everyone therefore had extremely high expectations of him that he was not always able to fulfill. So that was obviously where his reputation grew so much, and probably the reason why he was such an amazing player on Championship Manager 93. He started at Anderlecht, that's where we find him in the game. Had a loan spell out to PSV, where he still had a really good record, scoring 10 goals in 22 league games. And then came over to England and played for Aston Villa and Coventry, but that's really where his star started to fall. Even though he still played for Venezia in Italy and Boca Juniors, which is obviously an iconic club, but he played in many countries, many teams, but it seems like he's a bit of a cautionary tale for putting too much pressure on young players to be successful. And even though he looked like such a good player at a young age, he never quite was able to fulfill that potential. So despite never hitting the heights in real life, Championship Manager fans will always love Nii Lamptey because he was the ultimate wonder kid, a player with unreal stats who could transform any team. His real-life career may not have matched his virtual greatness, but he is a true cult icon of the game. So at number 2 is Paul Warhurst, who is an all-round great of Championship Manager. In the 93 version, he's at Sheffield Wednesday, and like George Ndah, can play in both defence and attack. But in the 94 update, he's signed for Blackburn Rovers and has gone even more utility, and can now play in defence, midfield and attack, making him one of the most versatile players of the game, and basically a must-signing for any team. So like Paul Warhurst in Championship Manager, it seems like this balance between defender and striker, really mirrored in his career. In midway through his second season at Sheffield Wednesday, injuries to David Hirst and Mark Bright saw Warhurst deployed as an emergency striker. And then in a phenomenal sequence, he scored 12 goals in as many games. And after 4 years as a defender, he was called up to the England national team as a striker. However, Warhurst was injured and missed out on the opportunity to ever win an England cap. After his scoring ratio inevitably slowed down and Hurst returned to action, Warhurst then fell out with his manager, Trevor Francis, who wanted the player to return to defensive duties. And he was transfer listed in 93 and left the club. But an amazing stat that when he was at Wednesday, he played in both the 93 League Cup final as a striker and then the 93 FA Cup final as a centre-back, which would just never happen in today's game. I can't imagine a player doing that so starkly in today's game. And then when he did go to Blackburn Rovers, he did, ironically, then start playing in a new position again, primarily as a midfielder. So this is on one occasion where Championship Manager really did get it right in terms of that kind of battle for Paul Warhurst's true position. What a great of the game, and basically someone I always tried to sign on Championship Manager. So at number 1, have you guessed it? Yes, it's another Sheffield Wednesday player in Chris Bart-Williams, who is without doubt my favourite player of all time in Championship Manager 93. By the time he hits his peak, he's basically unplayable and works really well up front or on right wing. I love the fact that his character in the game was marked as rebellious, so I always pictured him as a bit of a maverick. And again, cool name, which just adds to it. You could sign him often if you were another team, but also work really well if you were Sheffield Wednesday. And when Chris Waddle starts slowing down a bit, Bart-Williams really starts hitting his peak. For me, a great. Is he also your number 1? Let me know in the comments. But let's see how his career actually turned out. So Bart-Williams was with Sheffield Wednesday between 91 and 95, scoring 16 goals in 124 league appearances, but then moved on to Nottingham Forest, where, interestingly, he actually switched to become more of a defensive midfielder, which just doesn't tally with his persona on Championship Manager. I just still can't get my head quite around that. But even so, even though he was playing quite deep in midfield, he still scored 30 goals in over 200 league appearances. From there, he slipped down to playing for Charlton and Ipswich, and he represented England under 19, under 21 levels, and had 1 cap for England B team. After retiring, he seems to have coached a lot in America before tragically dying way too early, just in 2023 at the age of 49, so taken from us way too soon. But I will always remember Chris Bart-Williams as the most electric, exciting player on the game. For me, he is number 1 without a doubt. Please let me know if you agree. So that's my top 10 cult heroes of Championship Manager 93. There's plenty of other players who could make the cut, but I'm waving away the protests and sticking with my list. Let me know in the comments who would make yours, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.